So I'm Chris Black. I've been in this community now. I just started my third year as the pastor of First United Methodist across the street. Methodists move. We are sent by bishops into communities. Our appointments sometimes are a year, sometimes they're 5 years, sometimes they're 10 years. But every year around June, we open ourselves up as pastors in the church to be moved to wherever the bishop has a need. That's been our way since since John Wesley, who was our founder in about the 1700s. So I've been in this community, like I said, almost 3 years now. Before I was here, I was in Oak Ridge at a church called First United Methodist of Oak Ridge. And then also I served in youth ministry and pastoral care at a Presbyterian church in Oak Ridge. Before that, I was a student pastor in Chattanooga at First Centenary United Methodist Church. So I've been all over the place. I grew up in Knoxville, did my seminary work in Atlanta. While I was in Atlanta, I had the opportunity to be a chaplain at Emory Hospital for about a year, working with folks who have dementia, Alzheimer's, and memory issues. And the reason why they assign us in seminary, you don't get to choose where you do your clinical stuff. But my school, Candler School of Theology, recognized that this environment of folks who have dementia, Alzheimer's, is a huge need within local churches, within communities, and there's a growing need for care and for good spiritual care for folks who have that and for their families. And it's an area that's really lacking, frankly, in attention and focus. And so my school, they wanted to encourage us as pastors, or folks who are learning to be pastors, to have some of that experience. When I was at Oak Ridge, I had the opportunity, I was the associate pastor there, had the opportunity to work with a nonprofit group within the community called Keystone. Keystone is a dementia, Alzheimer's care, basically care for the day, their daily care. And basically the church took, I think, 4 or 5 classrooms and a bathroom, kind of a kitchen area, and devoted it to that ministry. For folks who have varying levels of dementia, like what y'all saw on the screen earlier. So that ministry and being in community with them weekly and even daily taught me a lot too. When I was working with the pastoral staff before COVID at First Oak Ridge and with the staff at Keystone, some of the caregivers within that community who have a burden themselves, right, were really wanting to have church. They didn't feel comfortable bringing their partner, their spouse, to church because it could be an unpredictable thing, kind of like what we talked about earlier, the stigma of if somebody shouts out in the middle of our, very somber, very gothic, church service, that could be disturbing and a problem. So folks felt that stigma and wanted to have a space to have church. And so the pastors got together and wrestled with what this could look like. And we started playing around with some different ways of doing church that were for our community. And we came up with a service called abiding worship. Now, abiding worship is different than a normal church service. Now, I'm not going to ask this question, but I'm sure all of you in this room have sat through some kind of a worship service, all right? Could be Christian, could be not. All of you have probably sat through a worship service that was boring. Raise your hand if you have. It's okay. God knows already. Okay?
God knows already.
Yeah, absolutely. Feeling that feeling of boredom, okay, is okay. And we're working on that. The church has been working on that for 2,000 years. We're trying to get better at it. But some of that boredom comes from the predictability of liturgy. liturgy, the things that we do, that's the order of what we do every Sunday or whenever we worship. That's important. It guides us to know what to expect. But at the same time, that predictability can be challenging for people who have dementia, Alzheimer's. You have to take special care around how you introduce those predictable parts about worship. So that's what we started reflecting about. And what we figured out in working with folks who were in Keystone is that music is really important. Those of you who've worked with people with dementia and Alzheimer's know this. If you play a hymn or a song that somebody was familiar with a long time ago, maybe even they're nonverbal now, but if you play that song, Old Rugged Cross or Amazing Grace, the words will come back in unpredictable ways. If somebody sits down, maybe who's very limited in their language, at a piano, they can play in really surprising ways. So music, we figured out, was really important. So for us, we decided to make music a big part of how we plan worship. And so we would invite folks to come in, sit down. Whoever the pastor was who was over the service would basically put everybody at ease and say, this is a service where you can come and go and do what you need to do. We're going to do some things. We want you to participate in that. So we're going to begin with 5 or 6 songs that you all choose, okay? But we wouldn't use normal hymnals. We took 3-ring binders and printed in big bold print the words to about 50 songs. And we would put them in plastic sleeves. You know, folks with dementia, Alzheimer's sometimes have issues with touching and feeling different things. And we wanted to take the music away because that can be kind of a stumbling block or a hindrance, right? So we just had the words, and folks could flip through and with their caregiver, with their partner, choose a song. And so we would go around and we would say, you know, Leroy, I'll use that example as a name. Leroy, what song would you like to hear? And he'd flip through, maybe he would choose or his partner would choose number 15. Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Great. It does not matter if it's not Christmas. If it's July, we're going to sing Hark the Herald Angels Sing. It's going to be great, right? That's a song that is embedded. And so that's how we would open. We do 5 or 6 of those. And what would happen is that all those who were gathered, they had a way to share in the service, buy-in naturally. And so it's participatory in that way. Then we would offer some kind of a reflection, a very short, y'all, verse of scripture. And then have a reflection of some kind from the pastor. That's not a sermon. It ain't yelling and screaming. And those who preside over worship in that way have to be quick on their feet. Because somebody may respond to you. You may say something and somebody may say, that's right, and let me tell you this story. And it's up to us as a community, and me as a preacher, to listen and to recognize that and then be able to pivot and continue with what we're talking about. And then what we also found to be really important are the sacraments. Now, not all of you in this room may be Christians, and that's great. That's fine. In the Christian church, in the Methodist church, we take communion. We take a little bit of juice, a little bit of bread, put them together, we remember Jesus. That's what we do. Well, we found that the sacrament and doing the liturgy, that boring part I told you about earlier, right? Doing the liturgy where you have the Lord's Prayer, as an example, or the Great Thanksgiving, which some folks in the Methodist church, or if you grew up Baptist or Episcopal or Presbyterian, you're familiar. In doing that liturgy weekly, or even every other day, if we did the service every other day, folks would recognize that and speak with us, which was really cool to see that recognition. And then having that tangibility of bread and juice and taking that together and having that moment, we found to be really great. And then we would finish with how many more songs? 5 or 6 more songs. So it becomes sort of a celebratory thing. So abiding worship came out of some just trying to do worship for this particular community, to meet a need for caregivers in Oak Ridge. We are looking we planned and we have the resources to do services like that here in Madisonville. Sue Hamilton, who's the choir director at my church, we made the hymn books. And we have the order. We have the ability to do a service here, Cora, Veal, to do a service at our church, to do a service in nursing homes and in care facilities. And we found that our community is responding a little bit better to us going to places to do this service rather than them coming to us. It's just easier to do it that way. So we're working on that. One of the things so I told you my spiel and my whole story. That's abiding worship. And I think it's so important. I'm going to tell you why in just a second. What I want to ask you all is, and you don't have to tell me what church you go to or if you go to church or the last time you went to church was 18 years ago because you're mad at the church. It's okay. You don't have to tell me all that. What I want to know from you all, I want you to tell me how you are spiritual. Okay, that's a wide open thing, isn't it? How are you spiritual? Now, if you're an atheist in the room, I would wonder why you were here for a spirituality for the forgotten. But if you are, that's okay. There may be spiritual things that you do that you find a way to connect, right? So tell me, just shout out, what are some things that you do to spiritually stay grounded that helps you? Yes, ma'am. Read the Bible. Read the Bible. Yes, ma'am. Pray. Okay. Singing. This in community or on your own?
In the car, in the radio.
Absolutely.
I sing at church.
Yes, ma'am.
We have a service that when we stand up and sing and then we sit down. And I take her when I'm with her on Sundays, and she does well with it because it's also movement because you're standing up and down, just not sitting still all the time. Because every time we sing a song, we stand up and then sit down. And so that's giving her the music and stuff, and it's on the screen to read it.
Yeah.
Also, and so that's she knows the songs, the old songs. She knows them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. Are the others? Tell me how. I want everybody to answer, even if it just means going to get a Dr. Pepper, and that's the thing that gets you singing.
I have to say, Jennifer's sail class is a sheer joy.
Okay.
Getting out there, exercising the music, Cora Veal, having the fellowship, and I love my church. I find joy in going to church and celebrating. But the liturgy has always been, when you mentioned liturgy has always had that special connection because it's that memory thing from when I was little. And I go and I would know the doxology. I would know, and it would just come out, or the Lord's Prayer. If a pastor skips and doesn't do the Lord's Prayer during the service, I have a hard time with that. I'm saying it to myself. But yeah, there are certain things that's why I go to the church I go to, is that connection that I have even from when I was little, and that memory. It is like a memory thing.
Yeah,
it's really special.
That's cool.
And then the people. The people, it's the church is not that building or whatever. It's the people that are in it that are so special to me. So, yeah, I could go on, but I'm going to shut up.
Thank you for sharing. Other thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
I enjoy going to synagogue, but I really like taking a walk in the woods.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The different times of the day, you're affected by different things, whether it's the dew on the leaves, or whether it's the light coming through the trees, or whatever it is.
Thank you.
I attend the Sweetwater Association every Monday morning and with a bunch of pastors, and we go out to lunch afterwards every
That's
Monday.
cool.
I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
For me, I think, because I'm a really physical person, I connect spiritually with so many people I deal with every day. I just touch in their heart, their spirit, I can feel it passing back and forth. Look into their eyes, and I just love a lot of these people.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Other thoughts? Come on, be bold. Even if you didn't say anything, say something. Mhm.
I get on the
street can be dangerous.
And, you know, I put up, a lot of YouTube videos, religious,
Mhm.
and I've got one site that really helps me called Blue Letter Bible,
Okay.
and you can study any chapter, any verse you want to, just pull it up on Blue Letter Bible, and sit there and listen to it.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, sites like that make the commentaries I have on my bookshelf obsolete. Because I can sell those off and do some of the stuff you're talking about. That's cool. Other thoughts? Anybody meditate? Maybe in the car when you're driving somewhere? Right? You talk about rocking out, which is good. That's legit. For me, a good practice that I like to have, I have children. I have a 6-year-old, and I love her to death, but she inherited my problem, which is not knowing when to stop talking sometimes. So she and I are kindred in that way. She is a talker, she loves to share, and she has so many great observations. Molly is my 18-month-old, and she is walking now in a really confident way, meaning that she's not wanting to stay tethered down to me and mom, okay? So there's a lot of chaos as a young dad, as a young husband right now in my life. So finding time to be quiet, maybe even totally silent, away from computers, notifications, cell phone, iPad, all that stuff. I have found recently that that's really good for me in keeping me centered right now. As I work to be dad, and as I work to be a pastor and a husband and a disciple and all that stuff. So y'all have shared that. That's really good. Now I want you to give me a little bit of reflection. How have you been impacted, or how have you engaged with or interfaced or experienced dementia, Alzheimer's as a caregiver? Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's really difficult because you're taking care of somebody that you've loved for 50 years who doesn't, and they don't know who you are. And when they forget how to feed themselves, go to that. It's just like she said, it's going back down to the infant.
Thank you. Other thoughts? How have you experienced it?
Here where I work, like Diane said, it's a special place because some of the classes are specifically like Tai Chi for memory design for individuals to come and be special. Other classes are regular, but we embrace everyone, don't we?
Yes.
And people like Artie, she's a star. These are star people in my classes, and we love each other. We help each other. We lift each other up. But here at the center, of course, I'm in a position where I see dementia and Alzheimer's, and some of the students I've had the past 2 years, of course, they've moved on to more to different places because, as we know, it does progress. So I've had to watch that and embrace that. I visited one in Regina was mentioning, because we pretend we go to Elvis Presley's home and do, you ain't know nothing but a hound dog. And we went to Athens and spent a few hours there in the dementia Alzheimer unit. But so that's engaging, but they, like several people here have said, it's music and things they love to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thoughts? How have you guys engaged with this? Positive or negative? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So I had the experience of being with my mother during the last 18 years of her life, in which she proceeded to lose her memory. And it's a challenging thing to recognize that you need to be with the person at the place that they're at. And I learned many things individual who doesn't seem to communicate is totally very absorbing, emotionally there with you.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
Positive, being positive and reinforcing, trying to help help the people to know they can do it, that, they can try it, if they can't, that's okay. You've got to encourage them to each step of the way, and to know that they're loved and that you're there for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
My sister-in-law had Alzheimer's. Her husband and her son were identical at the age in where she was now. And he would come in and she'd say, well, hello, Bob. And he'd say, now, Mom, I'm Bobby. Daddy died. And I looked at him and I said, if you ever tell her that again, you die. I said, you kiss her on the forehead and say, I love you. I said, you don't need to make her go through that every time you walk in the room.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
you be where they are.
You raise your hand.
Well, yes, with Dr. Levins, I had similar, I took care of my mother and during her last years with dementia. And I always considered myself a very patient person to be able with that, but it does try you.
Sure.
And every day I would get up and pray for patience for the day. But then a friend told me who was dealing with it with someone else, she said she had been told by her pastor, instead of praying for patience, pray for strength to get you through the day. And I changed that, and it made a big difference,
That's cool.
in my dealings.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
So,
Yes.
Well, I had 14 years in an assisted living that had a memory unit. And that was definitely interesting. You would have people, I had to give out medicine. And so we had one lady in particular, she was giving us she would give me a problem every once in a while. So I would say, okay, so I go around the unit and then come back to her. And I would say, well, hello, how are you tonight? It's good to see you, just like I'd never been there before. And she says, oh, it's so good to see you. And I said, here's something new, right here. And she would take it. You have to take in the shower. They would call me from downstairs, and they say, we need your voice to get them in the shower.
Interesting.
They need your voice. And so you have to portray a softer voice, a different type of voice. And that would work a lot of times. And then their eating, they had to be able to eat by themselves, but you had to get down on their level. We had one fella that we had some makeshift tools for him because he was a handyman and he would carry his tools around. We had one lady that carried a baby doll around. And you have to find out what place in life they are, what stage they are. Then you have to go down to where that stage is, and you play with it. You never try to argue with them. You never try to say, no, you're wrong. Wherever they are, that's where you have to be too.
Thank you for sharing. Other thoughts?
Well, I'm a little bit like your dog. I can't, my mouth just goes. Maybe that's why I was a teacher. But I cared for my mom. I also worked in, when I was younger, I worked in a unit. My mom was an RN, and she got me trained right up to be a nurse's aide, back when they had nurse's aides. And I worked with the elderly at our hospital. I worked on the floor with the elderly, and there was a guy that was having to round up his cows. The cows are out. You gotta go out and get the cows. And even now, like I told Christy, I wish I'd known more, but it's good to know it now. But the one thing I have, and I'm also the oldest of 8, and I was never married. So guess who mom got to live with at the end of her life? And she had vascular dementia, but for me, it was this blessing. Even when she went into assisted living, going down that with the people that were there were wonderful. The nurses and everyone that I worked with, as everything progressed. But my brothers and sisters, they were so appreciative, and they said, oh, thank you. And I said, I'm the lucky one. I get to spend these minutes with my mom. However many minutes that I have with the people you love. And you just never, ever have enough minutes with the people you love. I feel every one is a blessing. Every minute is a blessing.
And what you all have described, I don't know if you noticed, but we shifted from what's your experience with dementia. Many of you shifted into empathy and how you sought to care. That right there is the thing that we have got to cultivate within our communities, within our broader society. So there was a song, the song earlier, the first one. Y'all remember the refrain from that? I don't know if you remember or not. I wrote it down.
What was it?
It's all my life you have been faithful. Now, they're talking about God. But when I think about that within this context, all my life you have been faithful. Those who have dementia, Alzheimer's among us, have lived and gone through the rhythms of life, and those around them, their communities, have been faithful. The question is, will the communities around them, the families, the people, will they continue to be? That's what folks need, is for their communities, the people around them, to continue to be faithful, to see them as human beings right where they are. Beloved children of God, I dare say, in this context, right? So that's what all of you seem to care about, or you wouldn't be here. And that's really important. Now, I'm a preacher, so that means I got to talk about the Bible just for a minute. I got to talk about some scripture. All right, now. So what I want to share is a verse that kind of came to my mind, and it comes from Acts. The book of Acts is a book where the church is kind of born after Jesus did his teaching ministry. Okay? And so early on in that text, the writer, the author, talks about what it was like to be in the early church. Now, those of us who are in church work or in spiritual work, they treat pastors sometimes like we're executives. We're not. We're not supposed to be executives. We're supposed to be pastors. Sometimes our pastors, my brothers and sisters in the faith, treat the pastoral role as a role in leadership where we're supposed to act like a business. And that's not quite right. There's all sorts of leadership techniques and philosophies around church growth and having the right metrics and doing all that stuff. And I hate that language. I can't stand it, y'all. And I mean that. What the church did early on in its time, it focused on four things. Four simple things. In Acts chapter 2, it talks about that. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, one, and fellowship, and the breaking of bread, and the prayers. And it says, all came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done. And then at the end of this, it says, day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who are being saved. Now, what's interesting about that is four simple things, but it's such a human thing. That's what the church ought to be at its best, is fellowship, like daily, breaking bread together, just sharing food, centering ourselves, meditating, praying, talking to God, being centered in the apostles' teaching. That's what it says here, but that could be wisdom literature. It could be Proverbs. It could be the Torah. It could be something that grounds you in a foundation, right? That is what abiding church and the gift that we can give to folks if we're intentional with them. That level of humanness, if you will. And if you start to do that, a lot of that fear that was talked about earlier and that stigma, all that starts to break down and go away. So when you guys are interacting with folks on a spiritual level, or seeking to care for folks, I would encourage you to cultivate that and to be advocates right where you are, outspoken advocates right where you are, toward these things, and giving folks who have Alzheimer's and dementia, the gift of those 4 things in their life and where they are. I'll close with that. What time is it?
Great.
Is that perfect? Is it good?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you all so much. I'm gonna hang out. If y'all wanna talk more, just let me know. Also, if you know of groups where you want Abiding Church to happen in a nursing home or somewhere, just let me know. And I'll be happy to go and begin a service and to start that. Thank you very much.